Greenrod is seeking to retain 5.4 million bank accounts it's set to lose following South Africa's decision to appoint a new distributor of welfare grants, tempting recipients with affordable banking services such as EasyPay. For more on this story, I'm joined in the studio now by David Polkinghorne, the Managing Director for Greenrod. Welcome, David, and thanks for joining me.
Oh, thank you.
I think the best thing is for you to just take a few steps back and unpack the relationship between Greenrod and CPS, because I think it leads into the whole discussion about what Greenrod is responsible for now and what CPS is responsible for now in the changing landscape.
Yeah, I think that's right, and it's obviously been a very complicated and controversial process from day one. But I think what is important is that there was 6 years of contract between Sassa and CPS
Correct.
to distribute social grants to all beneficiaries. Our role in that was to provide a bank account to every one of those beneficiaries, which we've done, and for that we received a 50-cent per card payment per month from day one. The real issue, I think, now is that in a transition process, and we've just seen it in terms of the reports that have come through, is a lot of misinformation, a lot of confusion. And that's unfortunate in the sense that the beneficiaries are the loser in this process and inevitably are being challenged to make the right decision. And so even the comment that we made a few minutes ago that we're looking to retain 5.4 million accounts, it's not possible we'll retain 5.4 million accounts. Our EasyPay account is an option, but it's only one option amongst all the banks in the country, and obviously Sass's preferred option, which is the post office. So the old arrangement was between CPS and Sassa, with us providing the bank account. The new arrangement is for beneficiaries to choose any bank they want. And as I said, one of our options is the EasyPay account.
Just explain one thing. When these recipients were taken on board, they received a Sassa card, correct? Yes. But then, did they also automatically receive an EasyPay account accompanying that?
No, the EasyPay account is a commercial account not linked to Sassa. So it was a choice account. Beneficiaries have always been able to choose any account they want.
Okay.
The default position was a Sassa Greenrod bank account, which was then subsidized effectively by Sassa. So Sassa would pay 1644 to CPS for the contract, and that was then a free bank account to beneficiaries.
So in that arrangement then, so the beneficiary would get the Sassa card, and then they would have a choice of any bank that they could subscribe to, or?
They didn't have to choose another bank, but there were some who did.
All right.
For whatever their reasons were. So, and if they chose another bank account, they would then pay fees relating to that bank account, whichever bank it was.
But if they stayed with you, then they would have the EasyPay account, or was it a different type of account?
It was a different type of account. So the Sassa Greenrod card was a free bank account for beneficiaries only.
Yeah.
An EasyPay account is a normal commercial bank account for anybody who chooses it.
Understood. Now, at that stage, the CPS was getting paid 16 rands 44, and in that whole arrangement, you ultimately ended up with 50 cents off
Correct.
that.
Yes.
Right. In the new arrangement now, what is CPS being paid?
Well, the new arrangement is that CPS was asked to continue for 6 months purely paying in the rural areas.
Right.
So that, and I don't know what arrangement they have in terms of, or what they reached in terms of paying, or Sassa paying for that arrangement.
Okay.
There is no other arrangement for the balance of those beneficiaries. Sassa no longer has a contract with any of us or any other party for the payment of beneficiaries outside of those rural cash payments.
So your activities now in relation to the whole Sassa story is only with respect to those rural areas where CPS is still active?
No. Well, we're still servicing those accounts, but we still are servicing the balance of those accounts that still have Sassa Greenrod cards without a contract and with no payment from Sassa. So
I see.
So we are doing that on the understanding that that 5.4 million will diminish ideally by the end of September if Sassas timeframes are met,
Okay.
to Postbank or any other bank. So at the moment, we're fulfilling a service with no contract.
So you're only getting paid for the rural component of
Yes.
the people that are being paid, but not for the rest.
Correct.
That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Now, where does the 10 rand that is spoken about arise?
Yeah. So the 10 rand arises on the basis that because Sassa is no longer paying the 1644, there's a cost to running a bank account.
Yeah.
So those beneficiaries with those bank accounts that we now are hosting and servicing have a bank account charge attached to them, and that charge is 10 rand.
Okay.
Our fee from that is still 50 cents. So the balance of the fee goes to service providers. We have Net1 still as a service provider in terms of technology support and those other services. They have to pick up interchange. So there's a myriad of costs that they bear behind that. But I think for us, the 10 rand that we're being labelled with is a misnomer in the sense that we still only get 50 cents, which is the same 50 cents we got 6 years ago.
So in essence then, CPS is carrying a substantial component of the cost associated with managing this ecosystem.
Correct.
And that's why they're taking the 9 rand 50. And that's reduced from the previous 16 rand 44.
Correct.
Does that mean they're taking a hit in the process? Or are they providing reduced services?
No, the 1644 applied across all the beneficiaries, including the rural areas.
Okay.
So that, and the expensive component is the rural servicing.
Right.
So there's a cost breakdown that one has to look at to say where was the 1644 being applied? Who's the winner in the game? Well, at the moment, Sassa, I suppose, is not paying the 1644 any longer.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't want to. They would have loved to subsidise the accounts, and we had discussions around that. But unfortunately, their processes didn't allow that to happen. So from our perspective, the loser is the beneficiary, unfortunately, because that's the only source of recovery at the moment for the costs of providing a bank account.
And those costs be the costs that are being carried by CPS.
Correct.
So where do we go from here? I mean, this seems all so convoluted. I'm not entirely certain that everybody involved in this, between yourselves, CPS, Parliament, Sassa, the Department of Social Development, are all on the same page.
I think that there's a lot of truth in that. I think there's an element of where does it go from here? Well, by the end of September, the position should have stabilized in the sense that every beneficiary should have a bank account of their choice, and Sassa will no longer be responsible for the costings or the provision of those services.
Now, in the context of all of this, there's this transition as well of the beneficiaries to the SAPO platform, presumably because they're being transferred from your systems to SAPO systems. You're involved in that process.
No, we don't need to be involved in that because it's a simple matter of opening a bank account,
Okay.
informing Sassa, and Sassa then provides an electronic payment into that bank account. So
Okay.
we would only know if they closed the account with us or if we no longer received the grant.
All right. And so far, what has been the progression in terms of the closure of bank accounts?
We've seen roughly 1 million accounts migrate at this point of the 5.4. So there is that process happening.
And what are the timeframes that they've set for the migration?
End of September.
End of September. I mean, we're in July now, so what, a couple of months away. Is that feasible to move the 4.4 million in 2 months?
Harold, I certainly hope so, because it's a time frame that obviously we're aiming for.
Yeah.
I think the key issue there is Postbank, and they would have learnt in the last week or so, or the past couple of months, they'll be learning all the time in terms of how efficient they can be in issuing new cards, new accounts. Let's hope so.
Let me ask you a more generalized question. It appears in all of this, without really definitive information and explanations of how this whole process works. It seems in all of this, there's a perception that things were done improperly or wrong. I'm not talking now in terms of corruption or fraud, any of that sort of thing, but in terms of the approach to the payments of beneficiaries. Do you think this was the best way to do it? Is there a better way to do it?
The current system or the old?
Let's go start with the old system where you were involved with CPS. Was that the ideal way to do it? Was it the best thing to do at the time?
I think at the time it probably was. I think there was a huge benefit that the country gained through cutting out corruption and illegal grant recipients. There was a huge amount of fraud that was uncovered and cut out. I think Social Development estimated that at roughly 2 billion a year that was saved through that. The actual process of getting money onto the accounts and those accounts being interoperable with the entire banking system has worked fantastically. So, and that's using obviously the entire banking infrastructure, the retail infrastructure, and then CPS in terms of their logistics capability in terms of getting cash to the rural poor has also worked very, very well. Can it be done differently? There's no doubt that as technology moves, there should be changes in the way it gets done. And that is where the country has to move to, I think, inevitably.
And the impact on Grindrod of the shift of customers or beneficiaries to the post office?
Ours is purely a revenue impact. As I said, at 50 cents a card, it's not that meaningful to us.
Yeah.
It will have a short-term negative earnings impact, but we don't see a long-term. And obviously, it depends on how many of the 5.4 we can retain.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, David, and thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. The Public Service Association is locked in talks with the Social Development Department on wages. On the line now, we have Leon Gilbert, the Association National Manager, I beg your pardon, for PSA. Leon, thanks for joining us.
No, I don't. It's a pleasure.
Can you take us a couple of steps back as to where this started? Our understanding is that there was a wage agreement at the general civil service level, but you were not happy to be a component of that. Can you explain to us why that is?
I think one should go back to the jurisdiction of the different bargaining councils in the public service, where the Public Service Coordinating Bargaining Council is responsible for negotiating for the whole of the public service. A few years ago, government decided to take Sassa and its employees out of that bargaining arrangement into its own when they agentized Sassa.
Thanks, David.
Therefore, the wage negotiations that took place now for the whole of the public service excluded Sassa employees. The PSA on 29 January placed a similar demand than the demand we placed in the PSCBC for Sassa employees in their bargaining forum where we negotiate their terms and conditions of employment. Unfortunately, at the conclusion of the PSCBC bargaining process for the public service, the Sassa employer, that's the agency employer, indicated that that the employees of Sassa are bound by the same PSCBC agreement, something that's legally and technically just not true. Therefore, the PSA members had insisted on their own wage negotiations that they are entitled to. We declared a dispute. That dispute led to a strike. The employer tried to interdict our strike last week in the labor court, was unsuccessful to do so, and in the labor court we agreed, after the employer committed to salary negotiations for Sassa employees in the Sassa bargaining forum, as a PSA we agreed to stop our strike at that stage and to let the negotiations process start this week.
Oh, what was the reason for the PSA being excluded from the general bargaining process in relation to the public service?
Well, no, I think the question that you're raising was relevant at that stage to the public service bargaining arrangement. The arrangement that we're referring to and that we're talking about for Sassa employees is a separate arrangement where the PSA is the majority party and where the PSA is entitled to negotiate salaries on behalf of its members, which salary negotiations started today in the Sassa bargaining forum.
Understood. So initially you asked for, as I understand it, somewhere between 13 and 15% wage increases. Is that correct? And some other benefits, if I remember.
Yeah, there's a long list of demands that the PSA placed, including salaries, medical aid benefits, housing allowances, danger allowances, and I can continue. As I indicated earlier, that demand was already tabled late January this year. The PSA today reiterated that demand. Even today, unfortunately, the employer was not in a position to formally engage us on that demand. Actually, quite disappointing to the PSA. And we decided, or the employer asked for indulgence until Monday to formally respond to the wage demand that the PSA initially placed in February, end of January, early February, and which negotiations are resumed today.
Why has it taken that long to address your demands?
Well, unfortunately, we were locked into these jurisdictional battles on what bargaining council do have jurisdiction over Sassa employees. I think that has finally been concluded last week in the Labour Court, where order was granted that we must go and negotiate with Sassa on the salary increases of Sassa employees.
Right, so now you're expecting a response from the employer on Monday or shortly thereafter, because presumably the courts will want to get some sort of feedback next week sometime.
Yeah, well, according to the court order, the employer must file an affidavit tomorrow or already indicating progress made in negotiations. Well, we don't believe that the employer will be convincing tomorrow towards the court that sufficient progress has been made, but we are giving the negotiating process opportunity to unfold, and hopefully the employer will respond favorably to our wage demand on Monday.
But clearly, if they're only responding to you on Monday, it's unlikely that they will respond to the courts by tomorrow, correct?
Well, I can't speak on behalf of the employer. Should they not respond to the court tomorrow, it may lead to a position of contempt of court.
I see. Now, if through all of this and through the court process on Wednesday, there's no agreement, what happens afterwards?
Well, negotiations started today. If no agreement is reached at the conclusion of this negotiations, parties will be entitled to the dispute resolution processes in terms of the Act again, and that may mean that the PSA may refer the dispute to the CCMA, get a certificate of outcome, and give notice of a strike action. We don't want to preempt that happening at this stage. Let us rather stay hopeful that Sassa will come to its senses and respond favorably to our wage demand.
I mean, we've just had a different discussion relating to Sassa and the payment of Sassa beneficiaries. It's been a long, drawn-out period of disputes and confusion and court battles. So clearly, we don't want to engage in another one now involving the employer and employees in Sassa. So I assume that's the position you hold as well.
The position that PSA held from the beginning is one of we don't want to disrupt the payment of social grants to the most vulnerable communities. We want employees to be able to negotiate its own salary increases, to get a fair response from the employer, to resolve the matter in a collective agreement, and therefore the PSA's view has from the beginning been, please don't place us in a position where we have to resort to power play that will indefinitely hurt those vulnerable communities. We hope that the employer will respond accordingly, reciprocate our good faith shown in this negotiations process, that we don't end up in that same situation again.
What component of the total staff count in Sassa does your organization represent?
We represent more than 70% of the employees of Sassa.
Thank you very much, Leon, for joining us this evening. It's been a pleasure.
You are welcome.
That's all we have time for this evening on After Worldview Prime Business. Join us again tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock, same time. And from me, Harold Bopalama, have a good night.